George Santos indicted for fraud on the same day Trump was found liable for sexual abuse and defamation. We'll dust off our legal degrees and help you make sense of these developments. Fox News posts a quarterly profit loss while Tucker Carlson plots his comeback. Josh Hawley has a book coming out titled Manhood. And someone sent me a passage. I have thoughts. A Tennessee teacher had to cancel planned Mother's Day celebrations because she wanted to acknowledge gay parents. And then, is Joe Manchin planning to retire? We will read the tea leaves. This is Majority 54.
All right, Jason. Well, it's one of the many lovely things about being in New York is that we're in the middle of history over here. And I moved to Brooklyn, and all those indictments were going on in Manhattan. Now across the street from my new apartment, we got another set of indictments. Is it causation? Is it correlation? I don't know. But Santos finally was indicted here in Brooklyn. 13 counts unsealed this morning, revealing
this picture. People listening can't see it, but like I'm sure this picture is from something else. But this looks like this somebody said, "I'm going to run a headline about Santos indictment. Find a picture where it looks like someone, Santos, just found out they were indicted," which is not what happened here. But anyway.
Well, yeah, and that's literally right behind this building behind me over there. And this is 13 counts. We're not going to go through all of them, but he faces 7 counts of wire fraud, 3 counts of money laundering, 1 count of theft of public funds, 2 counts of making materially false statements to the House of Representatives. Worth mentioning here, you and I have dabbled in the law. Don't commit crimes while committing the crime, people. That's what's going on here. Like,
right.
Paying cash. Don't lie to investigators, and then you might minimize your sentence here. But it seems like our guy here is in trouble. I don't even know where to begin and unravel these schemes are so crazy. Where should we start?
It goes back. We've had some of this conversation before. The whole pathological liar thing, which is clearly what Santos is, right? I mean, he's a con man, but he's a pathological liar, and that, to your point about committing crimes while you're committing crimes, if you are living in a fantasy world where the things you're doing are not against the law and the things you're saying are true, then as you're doing them, I don't think George Santos thought like, oh, I'm really in deep now. I don't know if I should do this. I'm all the way in. I guess I'm going to do wire fraud. I don't think he thought any of those things. I think he just had convinced himself, no, I really did get degrees from this school, and I really did give the money to that veteran's dog who was dying, when he didn't do any of those things. And so I think that's how this got to where it is. Also, he's clearly going to go to prison, right? Like, with all of these counts and everything, like, first offense or not, which if you count Brazil, it's the second offense, but first offense or not, I can't imagine he doesn't get prison time when he's convicted for all this stuff.
I would imagine so, and especially because the prosecutors tend to frown upon anything that is really within the nexus of the public interest. And one of these issues here, the U.S. Attorney Breon Peace said the following, which tells me that we're expecting some major jail time. He said, taken together, the allegations in the indictment charge Santos with relying on repeated dishonesty and deception to ascend to the halls of Congress and enrich himself. So the ascend to the halls of Congress part here is what makes me think this is going to be a lot of jail time, because if you're just enriching yourself, you're like any other criminal. And, the U.S. attorney is going to put you behind bars, but they're not going to really stack it. But the judge and the U.S. attorney here, they're looking at this guy and saying, well, the fraud actually led to this guy serving in a very public and important role. And I think the most important charge here involves around Santos instructing some Queens-based political consultant to ask for contributions to be directed to a company that Santos controlled, which was not registered as a super PAC. And essentially just Santos was taking this money, pretending that it was a super PAC, and then just enriching himself with it. So that, I think, is the most serious of the crimes here.
At the end of the day, like, all his lying and everything and all the claiming to be whatever he's been, like a lion tamer or whatever, at the end of the day, it's just old-fashioned corruption. Like, that's just, don't send the money to the campaign, send it to me personally. I mean, it's just your standard old-fashioned grifting and
yeah.
graft, so
that part of this isn't new. I mean, obviously the the web of lies, and the way he presented it is unique to him. It's a unique spin on the ball that he has, but a lot of this is just run of the mill stuff, and they're gonna nail him on this. I think the question is there going to be any accountability between now and then? And he met with Speaker McCarthy in McCarthy's office on Tuesday before surrendering himself to authorities. ABC News reports that Santos told McCarthy he would be charged. McCarthy is kind of professing ignorance of all of this. He did some double speak when asked about it. Because remember, this is a 5-seat majority. So if Santos resigns, this is a blue state. It's very high likelihood that this will go to a Democrat, the seat. And so, McCarthy
just in a special election it would, or like it's.
Let's look
like
this
in
up.
general, is it a more Democratic seat?
Yeah, let's look this up. Santos resigns. What now? Let's see what the Google says.
While you do that, I will fill in the rest on what McCarthy said. So McCarthy,
do it.
McCarthy initially, when he was asked about this, a while back prior to any charges, he was like, "Well, tell me what he's charged with." Like very snarky, like kind of being difficult with the press. Like, if he's not charged, I don't know what you're talking to me about this for. And then he got charged, and he was asked about it, and he's like, "I haven't had a chance to look at the charges." But then he did say, "Look, there's a standard way we go about this. If somebody is charged, is indicted, then they're not going to serve on committees. They'll still vote, but they won't serve on committees." So that's how he avoided answering the "should he resign" question.
Oh, now I remember this because I had a conversation with a potential candidate about this. This is weird. So if Santos resigns or is expelled, the governor of New York calls a special election, but party committees select the nominees, and state party leadership would choose the nominee for each party. So I was talking to somebody a little while ago who was complaining about this, because essentially you deprive the parties of a primary. And these Long Island political operatives and committees are not exactly, I would say they're not exactly the most connected to the rank and file voters. And so I think there's going to be a little bit of backroom dealing, which I think is a problem for another day here. But
that's pretty standard in special elections, right? Like, yeah. I mean, that's how it works here. When there's a special election, it's especially in a seat, because all the seats, there's really no truly competitive House seats in Missouri anymore. I mean, there's maybe something close, but there's nothing really super competitive. So it becomes basically a few county committee members appoint the next member of Congress, because whoever the nominee is chosen for that party. But it doesn't sound like that's how it'll be there. It sounds like there'll be a real fight over it.
It will be a competitive election. I mean, the environment favors Democrats because of just the kind of fluke of that original election, but it could, it's still pretty, you see it go either way. Well, okay. And by the way, this is Brett's home district. Shout out to the Meidas brothers. Well, okay. Let's talk about this other case making its way through our ethos right now. This is the Trump civil trial. I know it's hard to keep track right now. This is a trial that Trump underwent. This kind of came and went without a lot of focus. I know everybody was reporting on it, but I think everybody's been confused about all these different charges that Trump faces. But this is a civil case where he was on trial for sexually abusing and defaming E. Jean Carroll, who's a writer. And he was found guilty in order to pay $5 million in damages after a civil trial. And this was from nearly 30 years ago, and through some work at the New York State Legislature, they created a window for people to file civil charges. Later in the game, it didn't apply to criminal charges, so it's kind of a window for people to, exercise their rights over a short period of time. And she came forward and was successful in court.
Yeah. And so it's interesting to watch the Republicans do the whole, he wasn't found guilty, he was found liable. Like, okay, because it's a civil case. I mean, but the jury literally found that it was more likely than not that President Trump sexually abused her in a dressing room of Bergdorf Goodman in 1996. So, like, a jury of his peers were like, yeah, we think you did that. And they found that he defamed her in comments that he made while he was denying the allegations. So
Yeah, and
which
it became
my question is did he defame her again now that he's saying I have no idea who this woman is and this is a disgrace? Like, can she sue him again now for lying and saying he doesn't know who she is?
I think I don't know who she is would be protected because that doesn't like get to her character specifically. Obviously,
right.
like it would imply that she's lying. If he took that extra step, I think he would, but he will take the extra step. So we'll see what happens. The apparently in this trial,
because by the way, I think it would be really funny if every time he talks about her, he gets sued and it costs him a few $1 million. I just think that'd be hilarious.
It's unbelievable. Honestly, like it's remarkable to think about what his life must be like right now, feeling all of these legal inquiries, but he apparently the trial involved a lot of testimony of other accusers, but also the broader pattern of Trump's behavior. Touched on everything from the Access Hollywood tape to other allegations against him. And, this is where his own behavior was, finally came back to haunt him. There's this sense that he's Teflon, yada, yada, yada. And some people may say, well, what's $5 million to him? He probably raised more than that day in response to the verdict. But we're chipping away here. Chipping away a little bit by a little bit. And there's a lot of evidence, if you've been following this Georgia case, which is my favorite of the cases, that people are starting to flip around Trump if you're reading the tea leaves there. So you're just, you're holding him accountable one little piece by one little piece, and him having to defend himself on multiple fronts weakens him.
I would go ahead.
No, you said.
I was just going to say, I would argue, by the way, that $5 million might still be a lot to him because we never really know what he's actually
what's
worth
going on over there.
And we know that like before he was spending all this money on legal bills, he negotiated Stormy Daniels to $130,000 because that's what he could afford to, you know what I mean? Like it just seemed, and if you look at the people who he hasn't paid, like oftentimes it's a lot less than $5 million that he didn't have to pay them. So I think it could be for him more than we realize.
Right. Well, speaking of him, CNN has caught some heat because they've invited him to a town hall. I think maybe today is the town hall meeting on Wednesday.
I think it's tonight, right?
Yeah. And, they invited him on. And just yesterday, he posted on Truth Social that CNN, that fans of his, he basically was responding to fans being like, why go
to get into it, I think we have a video that Brett can play.
Oh,
that is
go for
video that he put out on Truth Social. And let's just play the whole thing. This is Trump talking about doing the CNN town hall.
Tonight, live from the great state of New Hampshire, because CNN is rightfully desperate to get those fantastic Trump ratings back. They were ratings like none other, and they want them back. They made me a deal I couldn't refuse. Could be the beginning of a new and vibrant CNN with no more fake news, or it could be a total disaster for all, including me. Let's see what happens tonight at 8 o'clock.
Okay, first of all.
So much here. That was actually what I was going to read. So much better that we put the video out there.
The deal that he couldn't refuse, I read a little bit more about it, is that it's going to be an audience of 400 either Trump-leaning Republicans and Trump-leaning or conservative-leaning independents. So it's an audience
crowd.
It's a very friendly crowd, right? Which, I mean, okay, I guess he's running in a primary, but on the other hand, he's also the former president. So like, doesn't it make sense you'd have like all sorts of political persuasions, but whatever. So that's the deal he couldn't refuse. Never mind the fact that he's still got a, $475 million lawsuit for defamation against the network. Okay, put all that aside.
Yeah, let's underscore that for a second. He is suing the network that's putting him on.
Right. Like, honestly, I mean, maybe they're letting him on because this constitutes waiver. I don't know, but okay. So to put all that aside, when he says clearly what CNN wants is those Trump ratings again, is there any doubt that he's right?
He's 100% right. And, and CNN, this is the problem with some of these networks, is they only, the sort of DNA of Crossfire is still deep in the crevices of CNN, where they can only imagine a world where you have a standard version of the Democrats and a standard version of the Republicans, which right now is Trump Republicanism, and that there isn't a wider variety of types of people out there. Like you can have, and, you know, this is how I spend my day. Like you can have actual conservatives, libertarians who are ideologically consistent and interesting without having to put Trump himself on. You know, when I look at this, it reminds me of Ted Cruz. Like, remember, like all these memes of Ted Cruz, like making fundraising calls for Trump after he, you know, called Cruz every name in the book and accused his father of murdering JFK, and like
called
you know,
his wife ugly.
Yeah, could you? But look,
I'd punch a dude. Like, let alone make fundraising calls for him. I mean,
no dignity, no dignity.
Yeah, and so to your point, it's like they're going after the. Are they going after just the ratings, or are they also going after somewhat of a conservative audience, right? Because at this point, like if you look at the way conservatives look at CNN, like they have no hope of getting conservatives to watch CNN. That's not going to happen. So I guess they're just going after the same people who, you know, will slow down when you go past a car wreck or whatever, which is a lot of cable news viewers. So it's going to work. It's a question of what is the patriotic duty of a corporation like this, because he's not a normal former president. Like he wants to be a dictator. He's an authoritarian, scary, awful figure who's objectively un-American. And by the way, 48 hours from when they're going to sit down to ask him questions, he was found liable of sexual abuse. Like he was found by a jury to have done things that if one of their, forget anchors, interns, there was a credible allegation that they had done, they would no longer work at the network. But they're going to put him on their air for like an hour. I used to work at CNN, and I think, and I don't mind telling you, this is messed up.
I have a feeling that, you know, in CNN right now, what they're saying is we have nothing to lose. They're like, we don't have an identity right now. What is the identity of CNN? I have no idea. Like
it's Jake Tapper doing his best.
Yeah, you know? And Jake Tapper
that's what they want it to be, understandably. And Jake, he's a friend. I love Jake.
I like Jake a lot too. I don't mind Anderson Cooper either, but like beyond that, it's like what is this, right? What is the identity of this network?
Well, there's some great people there. Kate Baldwin, like we could go through the list. There's some great people there who do very good work, and stuff like this undermines them, right? Just as there are, you know, not a lot, but there are real reporters at Fox because that's where they could get a national job, right? And they are constantly stymied because they try and report actual news, and then they're constantly undermined by Hannity and Ingram and whichever replacement level white guy they put in Tucker Carlson's seat eventually. And so what I don't know if CNN understands is this is undermining them in the same way that undermines people who are actually trying to do their job in the world of Fox.
Right. Well, we'll tune in tonight. By the time you're listening to this, if you're listening to the podcast version, you will know what happened.
I'm not going to tune in. I don't want to be a part of the ratings. I will obviously, because we do this, I'm going to catch the clips because because I got to be able to talk about this stuff.
I'll probably cover it on Lost Debate tomorrow for anybody who wants to listen to that, with a conservative table who goes on Fox News regularly. So that'll be an interesting conversation. So speaking of a conservative who goes on Fox News regularly, you somehow got your hands on an excerpt of Josh Hawley's book. What's the name of this book again?
The book is called Manhood.
Which it's not a sequel to Boyhood. Which is a great movie. Shout out to Ethan Hawke, who also lives down the street. He's my new neighbor.
All right. It's not a sequel to Boyhood. I don't know what it's a sequel to. He's trying to act like it's a sequel to the Bible. I mean, he writes a lot about the Bible in this, I guess. So somebody sent me, I don't think it's really out, but what's happening is he's basically doing a church tour around the country, where he talks about what it is to be a man. And then I guess there are some copies of the book available at those. Somebody got a hold of one and sent me this passage. And I think it's kind of remarkable because, as you and I have talked about quite often, one of the things that I find, and there are many things that I find objectionable and incredible about Josh Hawley, but one of them is that he is a human being who not only did he support the war in Iraq, he then, while he was at, I believe, Oxford, he popped popcorn, and there's been lots of witnesses to this, and invited everybody to come in and watch the invasion. And he treated it like it was like a fun action movie. Like that's how Josh Hawley thought of it. And then years later, while running for office, he said that he had always opposed the war in Iraq, which is the kind of guy that Josh Hawley is. And so now Josh Hawley, who is what, like maybe a couple years older than me at most, I think, clearly, like, I mean, he was in college when 9/11 happened. I was in college when 9/11 happened. It's fine whether he served or not. It's fine. But if you're going to be for the war and then later pretend you were against it, like, I have problems with you popping popcorn and watching the war. So here is what Josh Hawley wrote in this passage that somebody sent me about manhood. I'm not going to read the entire thing, but let me pick from it a little bit here. So it says, where Epicurean liberalism, I don't know what that is, and I'm not going to look it up because I don't care, urges self-creation as the path away from pain, the Bible urges different qualities of character, self-renunciation, and sacrifice. This is the most, like, this writing is horrible. I apologize for people having to listen to this. Like, this is like he just had a thesaurus next to his computer. The Bible says meaning is found and the soul is formed in confronting the darkness and setting oneself. I mean, you're just using oneself, like that's a thing people say. Setting oneself against it, standing between other people and evil. Does this explain why there is evil in the world to begin with? I mean, what the hell is this? And then he says, of course not. But it tells a man what he is supposed to do about it. It tells him that his pain and hardship can be turned to good if he will take up his post. Take up his post and stand in the gap. All right. All right. Here we go. This is where it gets good. All right. I'm going to skip this next paragraph, which is equally unreadable, where it basically says, but it ends in that a true man scorns the light of life and holds that honor you are aiming at as cheaply bought if all its price is life. Anyway, he's like romanticizing the idea of giving one's life for the country as something he never volunteered to come close to doing. All right, and then here's where we get to the good part. When I was 5 or 6 years old, I was out one summer day in the fields with my grandfather, Harold. I remember it was summer because the corn was tall and green and the day was bright. Now, just a clue for everybody, when a writer of a memoir says, well, I don't know if this is true around, because who knows? Who knows if this rule I was about to put out is true? I will just say, to me, where Josh Hawley says here, I remember it was summer because, is a clue that this shit never happened. Okay, right. But anyway, continue. Here we go. And I remember I was 5 or 6 because I was struggling with the laces on my work boots. Okay, so 30 plus years ago, there were work boots for 5 or 6 year olds. Don't remember that, but okay. They were thicker than the laces of my shoes, harder to hold, and harder for small hands to tie. Okay. I had to ask for my grandfather's help, and as he bent down to take hold of the laces, I complained vaguely about having to wear boots at all. He replied, "You need to learn to tie your boots. You have to know how to get them on right." And then he added, soldiers wear boots. Still a little sullen, I replied to this that I wasn't a soldier, so I didn't need to put on the boots. He replied, "You may be one day. If your country calls, you'll go." Sorry, Granddad, you were wrong. Okay, but anyway, here we go. He had some. Imagine writing this if you're him. He had something specific in mind. One of his sons, my Uncle Gene, had been drafted for service in the U.S. military at the height of the Vietnam War. It was a point of pride in my family that despite potential grounds for deferment, he had served in the 101st Airborne. When I was young, my mother showed me the newspaper clippings my grandmother had carefully preserved from the county paper with pictures of Gene leaving for Vietnam. Later clippings showed pictures of his return. I knew what my grandfather was referring to that day when he said, "You'll go." That was expected. That's part of what it meant to be a man, to go stand on the line, to go and defend, to confront evil and do something about it. Okay, now let's talk about this. What Olympic lack of self-awareness event are you trying to win when you, Josh Hawley, an individual who never served in the military, cheered on a war and then claimed never to have been for that war in the first place, would say that your grandfather told you that if your country calls, you'll go? Why would you say that unless you have a completely warped idea of what it is you've done with your life? Because all you did was go to Ivy League schools and then clerk at the Supreme Court. What is the hardship that Josh Hawley has faced that his grandfather is not like, man, what a tool my grandson turned out to be? It's just incredible, is it not?
It's unbelievable. And it actually makes me really look forward to reading this book. I think I might write a full review. But while you're reading that, I couldn't help myself to try to figure out what this Epicurean liberalism is that he's talking about.
Please.
So Epicurus. So apparently this is the opposition to Stoicism, which is really hot right now. You know, people like Ryan Holiday, who would be appalled by the writing and the ideas of this book. I have no doubt. Is, you know, the father of the kind of new, like refined, like modern Stoic conversations. He writes the Daily Stoic and really good writer. Love him. You and I have talked about him offline before. Mm-hmm. Epicureanism is apparently like a hedonistic, individualistic alternative to Stoicism, which is more connected and communal and deep, etc. So he's basically taking aim at people who he views as selfish, self-absorbed liberals, I guess. Now we're attaching Epicureanism to liberalism.
Because apparently it's selfish.
You can't be selfish and a conservative, I take it now. And us liberals are only out for ourselves. That is my sense. You know, I have not read the book, obviously. I'm really looking forward to it. But that's what I guess he's arguing. And it makes me really excited to dismantle whatever this point is that he's making.
Well, the part I didn't read, the first page begins with the words, God made Adam a guardian and charged him to watch the perimeter. Okay, well, there was no other people. Like, what are you talking about? Like in that myth, in that story, like, who is he guarding again? And then like the violence comes from within the family. Like, what are you talking about?
Here's what's going on with Hawley. I know him well enough. New listeners know this. Yeah. I went to law school with him. He's bored by how dumb he is right now, generally. Like, he's bored by like the kind of concessions he's had to make, the fact that he's got to hang around and kiss Trump's ass. And he views himself as an intellectual. And he's sitting in Congress and he has to do all these things that he knows are stupid, but he has to do them en route to this grand goal he's always had of being president of the United States. But he's boring himself to death. So when he writes these books, he has to throw around all this intellectual stuff as a way to keep himself engaged, and also to try to like come up with an elaborate edifice to like hold up all these choices that he's made, to be able to say, all right, I'm not just being raw, like a raw politician and just kissing Trump's ass because it's in my personal self-interest. What I'm doing is I am exercising some kind of like grand biblical, philosophical, moral crusade that has been long in the making, since the days of Adam and Eve. And I'm going to like bend over backwards to try to connect the dots between all of that, to paint myself as the hero and my enemies as like the main obstacle here. My enemies being these materialistic Epicureans, right? So that's what he's doing. He's sitting around because he's got to go home eventually, and he's got to read books, and he's got to then square what he's reading in these books with this really, really dumb public persona he has right now. And this is what we get from that entire exercise. That's my guess.
I think that's a great take. I think that's exactly right. Is that it's a God complex. He believes that otherwise, how do you justify things like being part of an insurrection unless God told you to, right? And on top of that, as we've discussed before, he is a very smart guy. And so, when you say you went to law school, you went to Yale Law School with him. Like, he's a smart guy. When you listen to him talk, now his writing is like when a smart guy is also a tool.
Yeah, it's honestly disappointing writing.
So condescending to like, he's just like, he's one of those guys who's like, I'm going to talk in a way that is purposefully over your head to make sure you understand that I am smarter than you. And whether or not I persuade you is really a secondary priority of me. I have said many times that Josh Hawley never really got over Will Hunting asking him if he liked them apples, because he is that dude from the movie. Like, that is him to a T, right? He just cut his hair and ran for the Senate. So, but I think the other thing about this that we should not fail to mention is, as you and I have talked about before, is that this strategy, which is an age-old strategy of framing this uncaring conservatism as a caring form of protective masculinity, is really smart, Because if what you're trying to do is A, win a Republican primary where most of the voters are white men, and B, have the Republicans be able to win by racking up the margins among white men so high, but also then bringing a lot of suburban women whose families lean conservative with you and have a traditional idea of like gender roles, well, it's very effective to say the Republican Party or the conservative movement is the daddy party and the liberals are the mommy party. Like, and that is what he's doing in a new way that is scary and could really work if we don't have our own argument for this frame.
Well, if you're a listener and you somehow have access to this book, reach out to me, Jason, if through your channels we can get it. I would love to get this book before it comes out in a couple of days, because
and I'd love for us to never pay for it.
Yes, same. Yeah.
And I'm trying to pirate the thing. I'm just saying, you know, loan us a copy. I ain't paying for this.
Somehow I think I might have trouble in the interlibrary system in New York getting a hold of this copy. But we're going to take a break and hear from our sponsors. We're going to check in with Tucker Carlson. A whole lot happening with him. We're going to then go down to Tennessee, where Moms for Liberty are causing havoc in our classrooms. And then we're going to talk about the future of Joe Manchin. Will he run again? We're starting to see, you know, some signs that he might not. All of that and more when we return.
Cold turkey may be great on sandwiches, but there's a better way to break your bad habits. We're not talking about some weird mind voodoo from your wacky neighbor or some sketchy message board. We're talking about our sponsor, Fume, and they look at the problem in a different way. Not everything in a bad habit is wrong, so instead of a drastic, uncomfortable change, why not just remove the bad from your habit? Fume is an innovative, award-nominated device that does just that. Instead of electronics, Fume is completely natural. Instead of vapor, Fume uses flavored air. And instead of harmful chemicals, Fume uses all-natural, delicious flavors. You get it. Instead of bad, Fume is good. It's a habit you're free to enjoy and makes replacing your bad habit easy. Your Fume comes with an adjustable airflow dial and is designed with movable parts and magnets for fidgeting, giving your fingers a lot to do, which is helpful for de-stressing and anxiety while breaking your habit. Join Fume in accelerating humanity's breakup from destructive habits by picking up the Journey Pack today. Head to tryfume.com and use code MAJORITY to save 10% off when you get the Journey Pack today. That's tryfum.com and use code MAJORITY to save an additional 10% off your order today.
Well, this Tucker Fox News feud is not going away, Jason. He posted a video yesterday saying that he's going to, well, actually, let's just go to the video.
The best you can hope for in the news business at this point is the freedom to tell the fullest truth that you can. But there are always limits. And you know that if you bump up against those limits often enough, you will be fired for it. That's not a guess. It's guaranteed. Every person who works in English language media understands that. The rule of what you can't say defines everything. It's filthy, really, and it's utterly corrupting. You can't have a free society if people aren't allowed to say what they think is true. Speech is the fundamental prerequisite for democracy. That's why it's enshrined in the first of our constitutional amendments. Amazingly, as of tonight, there aren't many platforms left that allow free speech. The last big one remaining in the world, the only one, is Twitter.
So he's going to Twitter, apparently. Musk says he does not have a deal with Tucker, but there's been a lot of reporting that those two have been talking. Tucker is still locked up with Fox News, but I guess there's a way he can get out of his non-compete clause if he just refuses whatever big contract money that he had. So either he could just take the money they were going to pay him and shut up for a couple of years, or he could refuse that money and go on his own way and probably make a lot of money, for being honest, just doing whatever crazy stuff he's going to do. That video I just played has over 100 million views as of today. And I'm sure they're not all fans, but 100 million, Jason, is a lot.
One of them. I watched that stupid shit.
It's, you know, it's a lot of people.
He went on a whole, there's a whole other section of it where he went on a whole deal about how, like, what's true and what's not. That's like really scary. Where I don't know if you saw it, where he talked about how, look, yes, there are facts. He's like, the New York Times reports facts, yes, but that doesn't make them true. And I was like, wow, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills right now. There are facts, but that doesn't make them true. It's like, it's, you know, do you remember Colbert used to, when he was playing his character on the Colbert Report, he talked about truthiness, which is something exactly what I was that's not true, but it feels true. Like, truthiness went from like a parody of a sliver of the Republican Party and of Bill O'Reilly and them to like the glue, like the uniting value on the right now is truthiness.
Well, there's actually, speaking of like these sort of pseudo intellectuals, this guy Scott Adams, the guy who does the Dilbert comics, wrote this book called Win Bigly, which my dad won't shut up about. And it's one of his core ideas is that Trump may have been wrong here and there, but he was always directionally true, was his point, which is another way of saying
Feels
truthiness.
true. It
Yeah, he's like,
feels kind of true.
he might not be right, but he's always in the direction of truth. And if, I mean, you could argue that about anything, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, like the Bills, they were going to beat they're going to beat the Bengals last year. They didn't win, but they sure scored a couple points there along the way.
It really felt like a win.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
but that's not to sidebar it, but like, it is a lesson we can learn as liberals that we are, because we tend to have a faithfulness to facts and things like that. We don't really think in this fashion, right? So like, we don't look back at events and things and think anything other than what can we use to prove this point, when maybe we ought to be thinking a little more, not in a bad way, but like more of like, what is it that we can say where it will connect emotionally with people, right? And the stuff that works on that is like, and there are facts for it. There are facts to demonstrate that the Republicans only care about the rich and that kind of thing. But we always want to marry it with some piece of evidence. Maybe we just need to be saying it more often, right? Just as a fact, because that's how truthiness works, you know? But anyway, back to Tucker.
Well, they're fighting, as you can imagine. And, you know, at some point they'll disentangle this, and Carlson will probably wind up getting to do his own show. It's probably in his financial interest. Whatever Fox is paying him, he could probably make as much or more, and he probably values his independence more than anything else. You know,
which he calls his free speech, by the way. But
Yeah.
the implication in that video that makes me so mad is that the thing that he said that was true that you can't actually say is what got him fired, which, by the way, was that's not how white men fight. Okay, like he didn't say that in this video, but that is the implication.
That's what these people do. And I am a longtime public believer in pretty like expansive free speech. Like, I tend to believe that the antidote to a lot of bad speech is just to shine a light on it and counter it. And I'm more on the libertarian side of Democrats, but I am frustrated constantly by these free speech purists on the so-called on the right, who just throw it around to try to deflect from their own inaccuracies, right? Like, free speech is a means to an end, and it's one that I will always defend. But that's just the beginning of the conversation. What you do with that right is paramount. So if we had a free speech culture and robust protections of free speech, but everybody use that to, you know, talk about Holocaust denialism, then we would be squandering the opportunity, right? And so Tucker Carlson is retreating to free speech because it's convenient, because he then doesn't have to talk about what he has done with this incredible protection. Nobody has more free speech protections than Tucker Carlson. Nobody has had a louder megaphone. He's had the biggest television show in the history of cable news for a long time. And what did you do, Tucker Carlson, with that speech? You spread lies continuously. But that's not what he puts in this video. He then just tries to retreat and say, oh, it's just about the right itself, not what we're doing about the right. No, I'm sorry. Like, the right is a means to an end, one that we will always protect. But then the conversation needs to be, what are you doing with it? And he has shown himself continually incapable of exercising any judgment with the loud megaphone that he's gotten. He'll still get one, but we shouldn't fall for this.
Anybody listening to this, if you get into a conversation with somebody about the concept of free speech and cancel culture and all that kind of thing, the distinction you've got to make is between First Amendment free speech, which is freedom from having your speech suppressed or stopped by the government, have the freedom from censorship, right, by the government, versus speech without consequences, right? Freedom from consequences. Like, when you work at a place like Fox, like I referenced earlier, I spent a year as a on-air contributor for CNN, right? I understood that the product, like literal product that CNN was putting out, that I was contributing to it, that I was just like, you know, if they put out a widget, I was like somebody on the assembly line, right? I was part of putting out the product. But I also understood that just like if somebody on the assembly line does something wrong and the widget doesn't work, well, then people are not going to buy that widget as often. And if I go on TV and I say something that you really shouldn't say without people being deeply offended, without, you know, there being potential lawsuits, that kind of thing, well, then you're putting out a product that the public might not respond well to. And therefore, the company that employs you gets to fire you from doing that, or the people who watch you get to stop watching you. That is not a question of having free speech. You have free speech because Tucker Carlson can go say that that's not how white men fight anywhere he wants. He could say it wherever he wants. You just can't say it and have your TV show. It is, you have free speech. You do not have freedom from consequences, right? Like, for a bunch of people who are like avowed capitalists, it's incredible how they just completely ignore the fact that this is just capitalism. It's just market forces at work. That's all it is.
Well, speaking of market forces, Fox posted a quarterly loss here. And so, Murdoch's son has basically been running the company, and he, gave some statements to investors, and, he swung to a net $50 million loss for the quarter, which compared with earnings of $290 million during the same period last year. The loss came despite revenue increasing 18% to $4.08 billion. So anybody who's cheering on this quarterly dip, notable, but this is still a highly profitable company. And once they put behind them this lawsuit, if they could stave off the rest of them, they will be profitable. I continue to believe, though, that the lawsuit was really important and helpful. It obviously pushed out Tucker Carlson, but it puts pressure on the company internally to change some of their systems. And so I still think it's useful.
Yeah. I mean, look, nobody should be so naive as to think Fox News is going anywhere. Although, do you want to talk about these Media Matters videos?
Oh, yeah. We'll take a step back here. Let's look at this. So Media Matters got some video of Tucker Carlson, the behind the scenes of Tucker Carlson. Let's play one of these videos.
I did. I talked to her at great length. It was actually pretty funny. I said,
he pauses here because he's thinking somebody say something with here.
Oh, I said, she tried to get, I was like, she's got a lot of liberals working over there. And, they see this as war. And we're the main force on the other side. And like, that's crazy. If you've got pronouns in your Twitter bio, you shouldn't work here because we can't trust you because you're on the other side. And she goes, well, who? And I said, I'm not going to name names because I don't know who did it. And I'm definitely not going to cast aspersions on someone unfairly. Just because you're liberal doesn't mean you did this. It does mean you shouldn't work here. And Roger would never put up with this shit. Why would you do that? Do you know what I mean? They see this as war. It's like, I'm an actual liberal. Like, I'm totally fine being like, our makeup artist is like a screaming lefty. No, but I'm not that way, as you know, but they are that way. And I said, I'm not ashamed of anything I said.
You do not look like you recently had COVID.
Now, they're talking to the makeup artist who's.
But do you know what I mean, Justin?
Lint rolling him.
If you've got like that horrible guy who was just horrible, who was Judge Janine's guy. Yeah, that guy is like a screaming left-wing lunatic. Why does he work here? What? He totally dicked over his anchor, and then we expect he's not going to dick over the network? Like, I don't have specific information on it, but I would.
So if you're not watching the video, the whole time he's got somebody lint rolling him, fixing his
That's
hair.
what the noise is. It's going over his microphone. That.
So a couple things about this, and he goes on to say some more sexist things and all that, which got him in a lot of trouble. The one notable thing that is just worth saying, because I have a lot of people in my life who watch Fox News who continue to believe this fair and balanced bullshit. Here's the guy just flat out saying he doesn't hire liberals unless they're fixing his makeup, I guess is what he's saying. And so it's just like
he says if you put pronouns in your bio, like, you can't work here. Like,
unbelievable.
I mean, wow.
Yeah. And so Media Matters published that. Tucker tried to, like, his people are threatening to sue. I think Fox is even threatening to sue over this.
Media Matters seems to be just dripping these out and having a great time, by the way, because they're just every few days there's a new drop of these, and the folks at Fox must be. It kind of reminds me. I don't know if you're. Here's an old one. What was that show with the movie with Matthew McConaughey? It came out before the Truman Show. Was it Ed TV or something like that?
I don't know.
Where they follow. It was like reality shows before reality shows happened, and they just followed Matthew McConaughey's character around all the time, and he wanted to get out of the contract at the end. And so what he did is he was going to reveal live on air who used like an erectile dysfunction pump at the network. And it turned out it was like Rob Reiner's character who ran the network. And then they finally cut the feed right before he reveals it. So anyway, every day he was revealing this stuff, and there were all these people who were really nervous. And so I kind of feel like maybe that's what's happening at Fox as these behind the scenes videos drop. I mean, you know, I've been in those rooms, those cable rooms where like I'm in there a lot. You know, I've been in there a lot, but I'm not in there so much that I've lost the awareness that I have a hot mic on, you know, like, so I would go at certain times with long periods of time where I have on a mic and everything, but it wasn't my job. I didn't do it for 3 hours every day. So I never lost the sense of like, oh, this is being recorded right now. But but I would always be amazed at the stuff that some people would say to me. It would never be as bad as that, but like about their colleagues or whatever, knowing that somebody was there listening. And that means that there are a lot of people at Fox who have said a lot of stuff on these mics. And
I'll put my conspiracy hat on and think, well, okay, how did these get out? Well, it's Fox News putting it out. I think they're probably pretending like they're saber rattling, saying that
it's all been Tucker so far.
Yeah, they're saber rattling, saying, "Oh, we're going to sue you, Media Matters, for this." I bet they say, like, I have no evidence for this, but they're in a PR battle, and they're notoriously ruthless, and so they're just. And who knows? This was a very recent clip. Who knows what they have sitting in the bowels of Fox News in terms of clips there? But the thing is, like, you can't cancel somebody who has the persona of Tucker Carlson. Like his fans will like him even more for most of the stuff that you put out there. And it's already out there that he's a hypocrite too. So there's not much you could say to convince people otherwise at this point. We already have text messages with him saying, you know, things like he was appalled by January 6th, et cetera, and, you know, disparaging Trump, and then tries to have a different persona. So if people aren't persuaded by that, no video is going to change that either. So the guy is kind of immune to this kind of stuff.
Which even further undermines the argument he's making about free speech, because he's conflating free speech with consequences, like a lack of free speech with consequences for speech. And yet there's no real consequences for his speech. He lost his job, but he still got his audience. There were 100 million views for that video. So it's ridiculous.
And counting. Well, we're going to take another quick break. And when we come back, we're going to check in Tennessee, where a teacher had to cancel Mother's Day celebrations because Moms for Liberty came after her. Then we're going to talk about Manchin and Manchin's future. All this and more when we come back.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. With the seasons changing, it is really easy to feel like a shift in how you feel on the day-to-day. Change is difficult for everybody, and during these seasonal shifts or any other kind of shift, it could be in your work, it could be like in the kids getting out of school, it doesn't matter. It's important that we take care of ourselves during this time, and we're always growing and changing, which is why it's important to be in tune with how we feel. Therapy is a way to deepen your self-awareness and your self-understanding. My great uncle, when I started going to therapy, gave me this great piece of advice. He told me that therapy is like getting a master's degree in yourself, and that turned out to be absolutely right. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, and it's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/M54 today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/M54. Athletic Greens is a partner of ours that's been a part of my daily routine now for years. I take AG1 by Athletic Greens literally every day. When I don't take it, like I actually missed a day last week. I was traveling to St. Louis and I forgot my travel pack. There's a noticeable difference in my energy levels. Like I feel more tired. I feel less focused, definitely less energized, and it's really like mid-morning or like early in the afternoon when I first start to realize it, and I'm like, oh wow, I didn't take my AG1 today. And now I'm home, but we're entering baseball season, not just coaching True, but like playing baseball for me, and it's getting, I would say, more than a bit warmer. It's getting hot in Kansas City, and I'm going to need that extra energy and that extra boost that I get from my AG1. It's super important for me, but the boost I get from AG1 isn't exclusively beneficial to my performance in sports. It also makes me have just better energy in my day-to-day work. So whether you're crazy like me and you're in your 40s and still playing a competitive sport, or you're just like trying to still be pretty effective sitting at your desk in the afternoon, AG1 is going to help. I currently take AG1 in the morning before I do really anything else. It makes me feel like I'm giving my body the nutrition that it craves, like I'm covering my nutritional bases. If you're looking for a simpler and cost-effective supplement routine, Athletic Greens is giving you a free year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Go to athleticgreens.com/majority. That's athleticgreens.com/majority. Check it out.
All right. Well, let's go to my former home state of Tennessee, where Caroline Mickey, who's a librarian at the Alpine Crest Elementary School outside of Chattanooga, great city of Chattanooga. Shout out to Emily who listens to this podcast. She tried to do a Mother's Day themed lesson and came under heavy fire from parents in the area, including Moms for Liberty, the sort of right-wing group that's been pushing right-wing extremists onto school boards over the past few years. Essentially, this stems from when Mickey sent out notice to parents of a planned lesson in advance of Mother's Day. And she wrote that the lesson would be, quote, sensitive to the fact that not all students live with a mother, and they would be celebrating mothers who, quote, fill the motherly people who aren't mothers who, quote, fill the motherly roles in our lives. And she notified parents that there'll be 2 books that they would be reading. One was Stella Brings the Family. It's about a girl who is unsure how to approach Mother's Day because she has 2 dads. And the other was Mother Bruce. It's about a bear who adopts a brood of goslings. I guess that's what we call goslings when they're in a group, who believe he's their mother. They shut this down. Didn't happen. She had to cancel it.
Yeah, well, let's talk for a second about what she was probably trying to accomplish here. Not that this needs defending, but like, if just based on your basic statistics, there's kids in that group, the kids in that class who have 2 dads. There's kids who, don't have a mom. There are kids who are raised by their grandmother, right? And those kids would potentially feel very uncomfortable. And it's an opportunity not only to have those kids not feel uncomfortable on Mother's Day, but to also help their classmates who are, when you're that age, their entire life outside of their house, right? Like when you are that age, your entire life is just the people you know, and you don't know that many people, right? So if you can create context for those kids to create a more caring environment, that's great. That's what you want to do.
Yeah.
So it's really sad that this is like.
Let's give it just like a brief anatomy of what happened here, because it's instructive. So there is a chapter of Moms for Liberty in the area. They attacked the whole idea of this on social media. They basically weaponized the letter and all this kind of stuff. And then in local newspapers, they wrote about how this is Leninist indoctrination, anti-Christian, a threat to Western civilization. One woman called on locals to pray for children, to guard them against the demonic threat posed by these books. And they accused this librarian of being a groomer. This is all stuff that's out of a playbook. This is not random acts. This is coordinated stuff. And
it's
then
not spontaneous.
The Hamilton County School Superintendent, Justin Robertson, which if you're in the area, you might want to shoot Justin a little note. He canceled the lesson. The superintendent canceled the lesson and would not comment on it when asked by the Tennessee Holler, a local progressive news site. So they don't want to be accountable for their decisions, but they seem to be accountable to a vocal minority in the area who are kicking up dust over a seemingly harmless lesson that actually had a really good rationale. And so, or celebration, not even a lesson, just celebration of Mother's Day.
Yeah, this is, my kids are 9 and 2.5, right? 9.5 and 2.5. Drew's very big on the half, so I got to say it. And like, one of the things that I have learned is the importance of not necessarily thinking it's too early all the time to discuss certain things. Like I had a conversation one day, my son maybe won't like that I divulged this, but I had a conversation with him the other day where we were talking about puberty because it's not that far away in his life. He was curious about it. It's probably, just like 18 to 24 to 36 months away that it's going to start, something like that. It starts kind of earlier for men in my family. And so like we had this conversation, very casual conversation about it. And I'm doing the thing that parents always do where I talk about, well, here's the way your body's going to change and you're going to start to feel differently about and I started to say about girls. And I said about girls, I said, or it might be boys. And the thing is, I'm assuming because we haven't had that many conversations about this, that I'm introducing a new concept to my son. But the truth is like they're exposed to this stuff all the time.
They know it. Yeah.
And so what happened next was evidence that clearly where he goes to school, they've done a very good job of talking about this, because True was not like, oh, he didn't like recoil at the idea. He just very matter of factly said to me, and in a way that I could tell came with no judgment from him. He just goes, "Dad, I don't think I'm gay." And I was like, "Well, okay, but you might be." And I just want to remind you, like, if it turns out you are, like, your mom and I don't care. We just want you to be happy. We don't care what you are. And he goes, "Yeah, I know, it'd be fine." He goes, "But I don't think I am." And I was like, "Okay, fine." End of conversation. Like, my point is, like, it's not a bad thing when school helps you do that. Like
Right.
when you don't have to do the entire conversation yourself, and then you don't have to worry that your kid is going to school armed with a different set of ideas than not ideas, but a different set of knowledge, right? And is farther ahead than the other kids by a lot. Because that's one thing I've always thought about, is like, I want to have these conversations early with my kid, but I also don't necessarily want to get out in front of where the other parents in class are, because when kids find out something new, they go to school and they talk about it right away. So I like that this kind of stuff has been broached at his school, so that when I talk to him about it, he's got a little bit of context for it, and it's not some crazy scandalous sounding new thing. And I don't have to say, but don't talk about this with your classmates yet, because then that does make it feel wrong and taboo. And so,
Yeah,
I think what this librarian's doing is great.
They talk about grooming, which is making people a certain way, and we could have that debate. But then what they're trying to push is an inhospitable environment for people because of who they are. So, regardless of who's causing what, if you are gay or you are trans, their vision on the right now is the least hospitable environment possible. And we're talking about children, right? They're trying to make the school and the library a hostile place for people because of who they are. And you know what? There are gay Republicans, right? There are Republicans who probably want to be trans, come out as trans, but who are under tremendous pressure in their communities. And,
and a lot of them we don't know about because they kill themselves. Like, if we're being real.
For sure.
Yeah. So it has huge consequences.
Well, if you're in the area, please send us a voicemail. If you're, in that district, in the Hamilton County School District or the surrounding areas, if you have more context to that. Caroline, if you're a listener or a friend of Caroline, reach out to her. We'd love to talk to her. I'll dispense with this last one quickly because we are running out of time. But Politico had an article about how a GOP group tied to McConnell launched a $2 million ad campaign really early, bashing Manchin. Manchin is running against a very formidable, likely Republican challenger in Justice, the governor. And so there was all the speculation in this Political article about whether Manchin was going to run or not. It seemed to imply that he's more likely than not to not run, and so he's less likely to run than he's been before, but he hasn't made up his mind yet. Really not much to talk about here, Jason, other than we wanted to flag it for our listeners to be like, regardless of how we feel about Joe Manchin, we want him to run. It's an uphill race. He's way, way, way behind in the polls. But as you'll read in this article, he's a singular figure in the state who's probably the only human being on the planet who can carry that for a Democrat, in my opinion.
You want to hear my hot take on it?
What?
My hot take is I'm not going to be that upset if he doesn't run. And it's not because, like, obviously I have disagreements with Joe Manchin. It's because the likelihood is he's not going to win that race.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, let's save our bullets for somewhere else. Probably the wrong analogy to use anymore, but save our resources for somewhere else. If he can win, great. But look, Justice is what? He's a former Democrat, right? Who became a Republican. So, like, in a lot of ways, he's on Manchin's corner. So
yeah, they share strategists. If you read the article, they have like the same strategists. Yeah, which is crazy. Okay, we'll do a grab an or and then one for us. My grab an or is, if you live in the LA area, California 30th, which is Schiff's district, is now going to be an open seat election. I just want to plug a good friend of mine named Nick Melvoin, who's running for the school board election there. These are the neighborhoods of Fairfax, Hollywood, West Hollywood, Hollywood Hills, Hancock Park, Los Feliz, Silver Lake, Burbank, and Glendale. And look, if you've got another candidate in the race no offense to those candidates. I'll just say that I love Nick. He was on the school board, and he's one of those people who he's on the school board right now. He's dealt with everything from hacks to the district to COVID closures to strikes. He was a big supporter of the workers on the front lines. Most recently, he's been pushing tons of innovation around using district land for teacher housing. He's just a really clear thinker, a very courageous person. And he's the kind of person who works as hard as anybody I know in politics and is as real as any candidate I've met out there. So he's just a really good human being. And he's running in that race. And look, I'm sure as time goes on, there's going to be a lot of people in that race that we all love. But I just wanted to say a special note about him. If you like what you heard, go check him out at nickmelvoin.com. You can donate money, you can go volunteer, walk into a district office, etc. They're pretty active, but just wanted to say a good word about Nick.
Okay. How do you spell? Tell him how to spell Melvoin and tell him again where he is.
Nick, Nick, Melvoin, MELVOIN.com.
All right. One for us. What's going on? You're in your new apartment.
Moved this, like a week ago, I moved here to Brooklyn. I'm loving the Brooklyn lifestyle. I almost bought a dog the other day and I talked myself out of it because of all my travel. But, it's what's cool is I still have my office in Soho and I go to that office a lot on most days. I'm out there right now and I get my Manhattan fix, but then I come back and you wouldn't think anything around here is quiet, but it is so much quieter around here. And it's like brownstone neighborhoods. And I run into people I know all the time here in a way I didn't in Manhattan. So I'm living in the burbs, man. It's good. I love it.
No, I've been out to Brooklyn when I've been out there, and it's definitely not as loud as the rest of New York, is how I would put it. So,
fewer rats too, at least in this area.
Apparently that's a big thing right now. I guess it's always a big thing.
Always
now
been a big
rich
thing,
people
yeah.
are getting rats, and that's the difference.
My neighborhood, my old neighborhood where I was living is I think like the richest zip code in all of New York City, and not because I lived there. I lived in a not so crazy apartment. It's long been speculation on this podcast about how I got that apartment. We'll save it for another day. But the amount of rats in that area, like I would see dozens of rats sometimes on a given Saturday just walking around, and you have to really work hard to win the battle against them, especially if you have an old apartment like mine, which had all kinds of holes and crevices for people to go into. I had like sound generating things and traps and all kinds of stuff.
Really? Are you? Do rats freak you out?
No, not anymore.
Yeah.
I think like when I was a kid, I did. Now it's just like you treat them like anything else. And there's a homeostasis that exists now in New York where you leave them alone, they leave you alone. Yeah. And you just learn not to keep food out or anything like that. And there's like a constant battle. Actually, the rats have turned us humans against each other because of the way people deposit their trash. You'll see a lot of arguments about when people put their trash out and whether they're using the proper bags and whether you're putting your trash in somebody else's receptacle or whatever, because we don't have like a good infrastructure for collecting trash in New York. So, but the rats are fine. They leave everybody alone right now. Yeah.
New York's getting like a rat czar.
They did. They hired one. Yeah. And it's a pretty well paid position. I think 6 figures. And it's tough out there. It's harder than you think.
Is that person going to consider introducing snakes? Because, I mean, that'll do it.
That's funny. You should say that. The current mayor got in trouble because when he was borough president of Brooklyn a couple of years ago, did a press conference on the front halls of Borough Hall with like some elaborate rat trap that he found that he wanted to deploy throughout the entire borough that involved drowning the rats or something. And animal rights groups went crazy. But actually, it's funny. When that happened, I said to this guy, Chris Marte, that who's our city councilman now in Lower Manhattan, I said to him, this guy's going to win because he understands that this is a real problem for a lot of people. And a lot of people laughed at him, crazy. The trap was probably the wrong trap or whatever. But the fact that he was spending his time on that issue and doing it in like kind of like hands-on way, it's like, yeah, there's something about this guy. Like he kind of gets, he gets the retail aspects of the politics and he's rolling up his sleeves for better or worse. I'm
telling you, man, snakes. I'm not saying you should do it. I'm just saying it'll take care of the rats. No question about it. Maybe hawks instead. I mean, the people might be more into that, and it would be quite something to watch. Anyway, well, that's exciting. I can't wait to come visit you out there.
I hogged the one for me. So tell me what's happening in your world.
I had a cool thing happen. I wasn't going to talk about, but there's kind of a neat story with True in it. Is that there's this thing called the Truman Good Neighbor Award, and basically, ever since ever since Truman left office and settled again back here, came home to the Kansas City area, a bunch of his friends started doing an annual birthday celebration for him where they would raise money for scholarship students and other things, and they would give an award. They would give the Truman Good Neighbor Award to somebody, and it's like the cast that has gotten this annual award is like Sandra Day O'Connor and Walter Cronkite and Buzz Aldrin and Jonas Salk and people like that. I've been to the event several times. I've been there to see Bill Clinton get it and John McCain get it, and people like that. And today's Wednesday, so 2 days ago, I got the award, which was wild. And
congratulations, man.
Yeah,
That's
it was
huge.
neat. I don't.
Did you post the video? I don't think I saw the video. I saw Diana posted photos of it.
Yeah, I put up like a picture. They'll have a video of my speech, which was okay. But what was crazy about it, many things, getting an award like that, which I'm past the point in my life where I'm not gonna lie, I used to covet plenty of like resume bullet point things. I just don't anymore. And so it was. I appreciate it a lot, but the funny part of it is that on Monday I was dropping True off at school, and I was like, hey buddy, I can't be here that long because I've got to go do this thing. And so he asked me what it was, and I told him, and I explained some of the people who had gotten it, and he goes, how did you get it? And I was like, honestly, I don't know. And he's like, no, but really, Dad, how? And I was like, well, I wrote this book that some people have found helpful, and I do the stuff building the houses for veterans. I was like, remember we've saved those Afghans and everything. And he goes, yeah, Dad, I get it. You have not cured a disease, and you did not land on the moon. How did you get, and it was very funny. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And then I brought it home, and it's like this very nice, very large calligraphy sort of award. And True read it, which surprised me. He read it out loud, and he thought it was so cool. He goes, can I have this? And I realized I don't have anywhere to put this thing. So now it's hanging in True's room, which
Amazing.
I just think is really kind of funny and sort of perfectly captures where I am in my life. Is that it means a lot to me that people are giving me an award like that, but I'm also like, it'll be his one day anyway when he has to clean out my our retirement home after I pass away or whatever.
Oh my God.
I just give it to him now, So I just thought that kind of captured things.
Congratulations. Yeah. I want to see that speech because you know how to give a good speech. So
well, thanks. Yeah, it was cool. So now it was a dry run for I'm doing the commencement at Georgetown in
I saw that.
9
That's
days
incredible, man.
Which is fun for me because I didn't get into college there. So them giving me an honorary doctorate, it's like, that's just funny, and it's kind of fun for me. But anyway, this has been me bragging about myself.
Love it.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. Remember to subscribe to Majority 54 wherever you listen to audio podcasts. Just search Majority 54 and please leave a 5-star review. Thank you to the Meidas Mighty. Remember, we all have a platform. Make sure to use yours today.